Alright guys, welcome back to the pod, back to Tomboy Official. I'm back here. I'm gonna report about something I was viewing online. And if you're 18 and, well, if you're under 18, this might not be an appropriate episode. Or go find your parents or something, but, you know. Anyways, I guess because it's YouTube content, I guess technically most YouTube content overall is not too adult rated. I mean, it can be, honestly. I think it is, but in a way it's not. So I was watching last night this video. I don't want to call it a video series because I wasn't watching the whole series, but on Helix Studios TV. So if I've talked about this before, the site. So it's an LGBT kind of twink adult entertainment site, if that's what you want to call it. The majority of Helix Studios content is, I'd say it's considered in the porn category, but it's kind of a different kind of take. So some of the content that I was kind of maybe catching up on, there's this episode, I don't know who all's in it, I think Aiden is in it, called Just Friends. It's 10 minutes 40 seconds, and it's, I guess, spoiler, it's the story with these two gay guys, and one of them, they're basically good friends, very close friends. I don't know if they live together or if they're just like hanging out all the time, but they're very close. And one of them, I think he was like, I'm swearing off men because he just broke up with someone, and then almost immediately he hooks up with this other guy. And when the friend who is kind of into him starts to be like talking about his, like, I guess he is kind of talking to a different friend, like outside of that best friendship, and he's kind of like telling him that he kind of might have feelings for his best friend or something. And then they kind of realize, they have this conversation about this whole situation that's going on, and they both kind of want to start seeing if they can kind of make it work. And there's stories like that I really like. I really like how it's like, I don't know how to explain this in a way okay, screw being politically correct. Like, I don't really want to kind of get bogged down by that. So basically, like, in straight culture, in the straight world, like, for example, I saw the other day, like, somebody sent me, I don't know if it was like something on Instagram. They sent me something that said something along the lines of, I forget that, straight content exists, and just kind of like, as a queer person, some of us really indulge in queer content. Like, we don't really have too much connection to the straight world of content, especially nowadays when you don't like have to. You can watch just straight up gay stuff all day long, and gay stories all day long, and you don't have to watch anything straight, most of the time, if you really don't want to. And my life has kind of become that. Like, unless I'm studying like finance or marketing or something along those lines, pretty much everything I follow online is queer content. The stuff that I follow that I actually like. Um, and it's just very interesting to me because usually when you see queer content in history, it's been kind of like from a straight perspective, or from this narrative of like, look at all the problems that, queer people experience. And, also from being a black person as well, I kind of can understand how certain narratives just don't really fit. Like they don't help you. And so I feel like the narrative of, for black people in general, and I'm not saying this is accurate, but the media always portrayed, at least in history, and it's getting slightly better, but maybe not, but in history, you rarely saw a lot of black people represented on TV, and if they did, they started becoming like the token black people, or it would be like a black family, like everybody's black people, but they're kind of like in a white world, like the Cosbys and shows like that, and then there were other shows like It's a Different World, or I'm talking like 90s, 80s, like old shows like that. Like, it was a very different time period, and there have been channels, BET and other channels, where they're kind of more black people on there, but usually, stories like, if you've seen the movie Hidden Figures, for example, you don't hear about like, you know, physics majors that are black. You don't hear about wealthy entrepreneurs that are black. You don't hear about, doctors that are black. Like, yeah, like, name a few, but usually you don't hear that. You hear, like, athletes and rappers and that kind of thing. That's kind of like, if you want to see fields where there's a majority of black people, you'd probably look in those areas, right? Like, you don't see, like there are definitely black people in most realms of society, but you don't really see them that much. I mean, I snowboard and I'm black, and I know when I go snowboarding, I hardly ever see black people. So I know there are definitely places where there aren't a whole lot of us there, at all. But then there are places where there are more, not maybe majority of us there, but there are some of us there, but you just don't see any representation whatsoever. So sometimes the representation doesn't exist, but there is a population there. And so, like, you kind of only, not, I mean, if you don't think outside the box, or if you don't really know a lot of black people, it's hard to really visualize black people in certain spaces, and so it just, people just, it's just kind of how it is, right? But you kind of see that, it's like, when you talk about black culture, you're not usually sitting there talking about, like, education and performance and, like, things that, like, do matter in black culture, but and, like, healthcare, like health and, like, fitness and stuff like that. Like, these types of things do matter, but you don't really hear the majority message of, like, that. Usually you hear about the poverty, you hear about the crime. You see what I'm saying? It's kind of like the narrative is kind of spun in a way that doesn't really represent fully the spectrum of what the black population actually is finding important and actually is involved in, as far as like work and school and lifestyle and things like that. Like, not everybody's running around shooting each other or doing drugs or homeless or, committing crimes. Like, that is not reality. That's not accurate, but that's what the media is going to portray. And then the other side of the media, that's like the positive side of the media, you see like rappers and athletes, which that's fine. If people are rappers and athletes, that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's kind of what the white media or non-black media narrative is about black people. When it's not black people writing their own stories in modern times, those are still the messages you hear. And so when it comes to like straight people, hetero culture, usually that's the majority culture that's writing stories trying to be inclusive of queer people. So they've spun this narrative of, not to say that it's not correct, not to say that people don't experience discrimination or prejudice and all that. Just like with black culture, it's not like everybody lives in like a very safe neighborhood and everybody, comes from wealth. Like, that's not necessarily the majority of the black people's narratives. Just like with, queer people, it's not the majority of the queer people's narrative that they don't have to worry about prejudice or any like discrimination or violence and things like that. That's not a normal way of necessarily, like, we can't just completely write that off and be like, don't tell this story anymore because it's not true. But that is kind of the only story that you hear. It's like you hear, and it's usually a white story. It's like white gay story. Like, only more recently have you started seeing gay minorities anywhere, in the public eye. Like, definitely Drag Race and a lot of these types of shows out there are representative of multiple cultures and things. But I mean, this is new, guys. Like, if you think about how things were going even in like 2015 compared to now, this was not like maybe Netflix had like an LGBT section. I don't remember when they put that as a genre category, but I remember it wasn't always there. And then they did put a category, and then they started coming out with a bunch of movies. But I remember there was a time when I had watched every single movie in the LGBT genre. I'd watched them all. There weren't any new ones. There weren't new shows. There weren't new things coming out. Like, it was just like, I watched the ones that I was going to watch, and then there were some others that I was like not interested in at all, so I didn't watch them. And then there was just nothing new coming out for like a really long time. And that's been kind of normal. It's like, okay, we'll give them like a little bit. And I'm not saying that that's bad. It's just like, because at least I'm seeing things change. Like, I've definitely seen things change. But what I've seen lately is, like, in the past, like, since maybe 2017 or so, 2018 or so, a whole lot more queer content creators are now creating content for queer people. Like, we're not even like thinking about like, oh, what do the straights want to hear about, or what would they be informed by. It's like, no, screw that. We're gonna create content about what we want to create content about for our own people. And so, all that to say, that's kind of what I felt about this Helix Studios TV, YouTube videos, the little longer segments, where they kind of talk about like, it's just okay, like, these two friends live together, or they're besties, and you see things that, it's like, this is not a straight narrative that's like impacting these stories at all. You can tell it's like there's a lot of like, guys, sensitive guys, they're interacting with each other, they're hugging each other, they're very, they talk respectfully with each other. There's not like this big like machismo ego kind of thing going on, and they're friends and they talk to their friends about, if they have some kind of like situation going on. It's not like they don't have each other to talk to about it, and they seem to kind of be promoting healthy friendships and relationships and sexual experiences and things. They're just like, oh, like if they want to like hook up with some other person, then that's fine, and they just do it. And or if they don't want to, then they don't, and then that's just kind of how the story goes. And if this was a short film or an episode made by a straight person, there'd probably be like a prejudiced landlord coming in, knocking at their door, like, why are there always guys in here? Or like some weird homophobic situation where they're at the pool just chilling and there's some neighbors that are like looking at them sideways or something. It's like, the thing I like about these types of shows, or they're not like full-on shows, like if you only watch it on YouTube, you're not going to get the whole thing, because it's actually promoting the porn material, but the YouTube version of what they show is not like an adult rated version of stuff. It's like for whoever's interested in watching twink guys, their material. And so basically it just has these dudes just chilling, just living their gay lives without any obstruction from the straight world. Like there's none of that, in the story. It's like they're just living their lives, without that. It's like you don't really hear a lot of stories like that or see a lot of stories. And yes, it's fantasy and it's not reality. Like most of us aren't going to live in apartments where there's no prejudice, or live in go to a work environment where there's no prejudice, or have all these friends where every single friend like has a perfect style of communication that matches with yours, and like you always get along, you always understand each other, and you're never like questioning anybody's like intentions or whatever. Like that's not reality. I know this isn't reality, but also it's a version of reality that could exist somewhat more often than what I think the straight world portrays. Because the thing that I find interesting is, when I watch queer or non-queer media, I don't usually find it, to be very representative. When there are just like the token queer person in there, I don't really, usually I don't look at it and I'm like, oh yeah, this is so accurate to my life. It's usually like made really strangely. And especially because, like, I'm at a different age range. So for people who are maybe listening that are younger, I feel like there is like a bit of a different dynamic sometimes. Because I think depending where you live in the world and your age range and like your ability to have like that financial type of independence, like I can get a job, a car, move somewhere, work somewhere. I'm of an age where I can just do that. I'm not like 15 where somebody's going to be like, you can't live by yourself, you can't get a car, you can't, go work, you can't move out of state without your parents or whatever. Like, the thing about being a little bit older is that you have more flexibility to like go away, like get yourself away from prejudice environments for the most part, and kind of form a life, an environment for yourself that looks more closely to what you want it to look like. So when I see like Helix Studios video clips, I'm like, that to me looks a lot more like my life than what I see on like Netflix movies, or the ones that are made by like the straight people, all those kinds of like hetero versions of representing like queer life. I usually see when I watch queer content, a lot of times I see a lot of things that I don't see in, the straight portrayal. Um, and that's why I'm kind of talking about this episode, is because, that's kind of something that really stuck out to me. I was like, it's nice to watch something that's like refreshing, and it doesn't like make you feel like some kind of like negative thing about your own identity or culture or whatever. You're just like watching it and you're like, oh cool, like that was a nice story. Like I rarely say that about, gay stories. Like usually when you watch them you're like, wow, that was fucking intense. Like, um and I like shows that are, I'm trying to find more shows and more episodes that I can talk about that have that kind of quality to them, that are more like, queer people talking about queer things. And so that's something that I kind of wanted to bring to light, because I think is important for people to have access to that style of storytelling as well. Straight people as well. I mean, the thing is, I I don't know. Like I think a lot of hetero people are quite curious about a lot of gay culture, but also they're probably more comfortable watching the um hetero story version of gay culture. Um so that's just like um um yeah, those versions of gay culture. So I mean, I don't think it's just like but the only thing I can kind of equate it to minority wise is really racial things. Um, because it's like when you watch black shows made by black people, like I'll just put it out there. There's one thing that I've noticed when I watch certain black shows or movies, that if I'm watching them alone, I'm like, okay, like this is maybe it's funny, there's some comedy in it. But then I thought about it the other day, and I think I was talking about it, where I was like, you know what, if I was watching this with my white friends, I might feel a little uncomfortable at all the racial, you know, because I think, there are some shows, a lot of shows that I've seen that are black shows, that, the characters have some kind of jokes and prejudice against the white people in their lives, and they're kind of like poking fun at like the insensitivities and the prejudice, and like all, it's like a reversed kind of prejudice. But I'm not saying, like, I'm not here to say, oh, it's right or wrong or whatever. I'm not here to like talk about that side of it, because it is different when it's different when you have any kind of a minority, sexual, gender, ethnic, whatever kind of minority, talking about how they've been kind of like oppressed by the majority culture and the experiences that they have. I think everyone has the right to talk about their experiences. I don't think anyone should have to be silenced. But I just think in my mind, if I flip the stuff that some of the black people say, some of the characters say in these black shows, if it were white people saying that about black people, I don't know if that show would survive on the air. Like, it would just sound like really like prejudice and really like, whoa, like I can't believe they said that. Even though in the past there were definitely plenty of shows like that, and they still exist. And so I'm not like trying to say like, oh, black people shouldn't do that, or but it's just kind of like a food for thought kind of thing. And I kind of understand where it's coming from, but it's like the rules are different. The rules are different. Like, I think minorities are kind of more allowed to make fun of and poke fun at white culture, versus if it's like a white show, they can't really be like openly prejudiced against minorities, because that is like a little too far. And I get it, like that makes sense, but at the same time it's like a double standard kind of thing, which I do know exists, and I do understand that, but it's like I'm not trying to talk about that so much. I'm trying to talk more about not race, but more about like how sexuality is portrayed. And yeah, it's just some things that were coming to my mind. I'm gonna talk more about some of the other content that I've come across that people might find interesting, and try my best to post some about it and see if you guys like it. Just trying out some different topics and what I've kind of been up to. But with that, thanks for listening. You know, man.